Hello, everyone. This is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up. I've been having a blast over the last few months talking to some of these amazing writers, and it's great to see some of them who, you kind of can say, I knew them before. Some people who had like breakout novels, and you're like, I remember you. You had a breakout. That's amazing. And that was the case with my guest today. I was very fortunate to be able to talk to SA Cosby. So SA Cosby, his name is Shawn, and he's an awesome guy. So Shawn, I knew a little bit, not a lot, but I met him a few times, and maybe we had a conversation here and there at writer conferences, at a Thriller Fest, which is the International Thriller Writers Association, and BoucherCon, which is the national conference for Mystery Writers of America members. And always seemed like a cool, grounded dude. And then, he kind of writes noir. And in 2020, he had a breakout novel, Blacktop Wasteland. It just really took off and won all sorts of awards. And it actually just won the International Thriller Writers Best Hardcover Award, the Thriller Award. So that's basically the Academy Award for thriller writers. So Shawn's a little on top of the world right now, and he followed it up with a book called Razorblade Tears, which was an instant New York Times best-selling book. So I'm not jealous. I have so much respect for this guy. It's really great to watch his success and to see things take off, and just it could happen at any time, and it's so cool that it happened and it's continued to happen for him. And like I said, very down to earth. We had a great conversation learning about kind of his roots and his background and where he gets his inspiration from. And at the end, we make up a really cool story. So enjoy. This is my conversation with SA Cosby. There he is. Good to see you.
All right. Hey, how's it going, man?
It's going well. Look at that. Just
can you hear me okay?
I can. I was just admiring your disastrous pile of books behind you.
This is such a mess. My poor wife, she's constantly haranguing me to get this straight, and I'm always like, I'm gonna get it straight as soon as I finish this project. And it's like I go right into this other project, and so I have way more books than I would say I have more books than I need, but I have a plethora of books that I need to get to. I'll put it like that.
And let's be honest, you're not going to get to them. You're not going to get to nearly as many as you'd like to. They're just going to keep growing and growing, and eventually it's going to be an episode of Hoarders done on you.
I told a friend of mine, I used to have my to be read pile on my nightstand, and I said all it needs is a good stiff wind to fall over and kill us all, because it's as tall as the Leaning Tower of Pisa.
You're a big reader? Are you? How often do you read? Are you reading every day, all the time?
Before like Blacktop took off, I was reading all the time. I'd read at least 3 books a month.
Oh, wow. Yeah. But
yeah, I love to read, but everything when Blacktop started kind of getting rolling, I don't have time. I don't have the time, and I'm working on multiple projects right now. And I did just finish 2 pretty good books. I read, what's the guy's name? I read a book called The Boatman's Daughter by Andy Davidson. Uh-huh. Really intense Southern Gothic horror novel. Oh, and cool. I finished that. I finished an old book by Megan Abbott. I think it's called You Will Know Me, about some really tough gymnastics moms and what people will do to make sure their kids succeed. So both of those were excellent. So I'm still reading, but I'm not reading nowhere near as much as I like to. So
yeah. So where
problem to have, I guess.
Where do you live now? Where are you?
I'm still in Virginia. I was born and raised in Virginia. I live in southeastern Virginia. I left Virginia for a number of years around the time I came out of college, dropped out of college. I did this whole I did my whole Jack Kerouac thing for like 2 years.
Oh
Where I
yeah.
kind of traveled around and stuff. Yeah, and then I got hungry and wanted like a hot shower, so I came back home. And,
Let's
then
back
I
up for a
left
second.
again.
I was just curious, growing up in Virginia, where in Virginia did you grow up?
I am in a little small town called Matthews, Virginia, right on the Chesapeake Bay. It's about an hour and a half from Washington, D.C., and it's about an hour and a half from the the city of Norfolk, where the naval bases are.
Yeah.
And it's about 35 minutes from the capital city, Richmond. So I was in between some really big metropolitan areas, but where I live currently and where I grew up is extremely rural. It's very rural, very pastoral. I told somebody it looks like the set of True Detective volume series season 1. So it's, I love it.
Without the bodies, hopefully.
Yes, well, without the Yellow King, but other than that, it's a very pastoral, rural area. I love it here. I've lived in other places. I've lived in some cities and stuff like that. And if you had asked 21-year-old Shawn where he would end up living at 48, it wouldn't have been here. I would have been like, oh, I'm going to be in New York. I'm going to be in LA. I'm going to be doing. But once you grow and life kind of takes you down certain pathways, I actually enjoy being out in the country. I enjoy having my nearest neighbor 2 miles away. So perspectives and priorities change as you mature.
And certainly it lends itself well to a life in writing. But when you were growing up in that real kind of quiet pastoral area, what was that like? Was it hard to make friends? Was it?
No, what's funny about it is when you grow up here, you have a passing connection with everybody. Like
True.
It's 6 degrees separation, but without Kevin Bacon. And so I have an older brother. So between my older brother and my cousin, I have a big family too. My dad had, put it like this, I had 11 uncles and aunts on my dad's side. And I had 6 aunts and uncles on my mom's side.
But it was just you and one sibling, just you and your brother in your family?
Just me and my brother, but then I have all these cousins that are basically like brothers and sisters to me. So between them and my friends, everybody. And the funny thing about growing up in a small town is because of that pastoral setting, because of the slow pace, when you hit adolescence, when you hit your teens, you craving action. So you do a lot of dumb stuff. And, I remember going to, I don't know if you're familiar with the term, but I remember going to what we used to call field parties, where everybody that had a car would go out into this pasture and turn their headlights on, and then you set up a bonfire, and then I guess statute of limitations will run out. You find an older person to go buy you some wine or some beer. And, back then, you're not drinking for taste. You just drink to get drunk. So it's
you're right. It's like a big tailgate. Yeah.
A lot of horrible. Exactly. And so there's been a lot of horrible Mad Dog 2020 nights from that. But it's a part of growing up. And again, you want that. You crave that action. You crave that ability to spread your wings, to kind of get your feet wet in what we consider the adult world. And so, you make a lot of, hopefully, if you're like me, you make dumb mistakes that don't have lifelong consequences. The worst thing ever happens, you might got to put your car in the shop because you decided to try to go mudding in a field that had deep ditches and realize were there. But growing up in that environment, because everyone, everything is very intimate, like the good things and the bad things. When you break up with your high school sweetheart, everybody knows it. But when you win the state wrestling championship, everybody knows it. So it creates an interesting sense of community that is hard to replicate once you go out into the wider world.
But it's interesting how you talk about, that sense of needing to kind of be free and to explore and to be an adult in a very small community. I mean, you must have had friends or known people who it didn't work out great for them. Maybe they pushed things too far and they did have lifelong consequences as a result. Was that common at all or not so much?
Oh, it was common. It was very common. I mean, a lot of those people, I feel with my writing, I feel like I'm able to tell those stories sort of as a cautionary tale. I had a really good friend. I'll tell you real quick. So I had a really good friend. I started kindergarten with. We were, in first grade together. He was a really cool guy, and he had. I was very blessed because even though I grew up, we were really poor. I had a good family life. My mom and dad separated when I was young, and so between my mom and dad trying to navigate that, we ended up a lot of times in some kind of a really poor situation. We ended up living with my grandparents for a while. But despite the poverty that we lived in, I had a home life where, my grandparents loved me. My grandmother spoiled me. My mom loved me. I was surrounded by people who cared about me. So the difficulties that we had as far as economically didn't translate over to any type of social or any type of emotional problems. I had a friend that wasn't that lucky, and so he had a really tough home life, and so he was always over my house or somebody else's house. He didn't want to go home. And as we grew, like you said, he kept pushing boundaries, and unfortunately, he stole a truck from auto salvage yard, and he was like 15. He didn't know how to drive a truck, and he flipped it, and he injured himself really bad. And so people like that I grew up with, that, people that are really pushing that envelope, they're not so much pushing the envelope for thrill seeking. They want to be free. They want to get out of this bad situation they find themselves in. And so a lot of my writing is me telling their stories, somewhat as a cautionary tale, but also somewhat to explain how somebody can find themselves in that situation.
Yeah, for sure. Like the person who's trying to kind of get away from that lifestyle and then gets lured back in almost through no fault of their own. I mean, I know you definitely touch on that topic as well in your writing. What was the education system like when you were growing up? You said you kind of grew up in poor.
It was funny, again, because it's a small town. Yeah, I mean, we know everybody. I know, like, my teachers knew my mom. A couple of my teachers went to school with my mom. Yeah. So in that respect, it was good. I think the difficulty, and I don't think I'm telling any tales out of school, no pun intended. I think the difficulty was that because it's a small town, sometimes you were running into teachers that had preconceived notions about you.
Yeah.
Because of your family history. Certain families get a bad name. Sometimes they deserve it, but a lot of times they don't. And so those teachers already have those preconceived ideas about you. So they don't connect with you as well as you would like, or if you're like me, you're from the poor side of town. Sometimes teachers just haven't assumed things about you. Yeah. And so, I'll tell you a funny story. When I was in 8th grade, it was the first year you could pick an elective. You could, whatever class you wanted to take. And I loved history and politics. I still do. So civics was our elective class, one of them. But the teacher that was my guidance counselor, or the teacher that was supposed to be my guidance counselor, she didn't think that I could do it. And so she just, on her own, put me in wood shop. And no offense, I have incredible respect for anybody that can do woodworking, because I don't have that skill. That is not a part of my skill set. And after a couple of weeks, I told my mom, I said, I really hate being in this class. I'm not good at it, and I feel left behind. So my mom, marched down to the school and was like, well, why is he in this class? And so for long story short, they put me in civics, but the teacher told my mom, she's like, well, he's so far behind, he's going to have to get an A for the rest of the year. And my mom was like, he will. So, I was very lucky again to have a mom who just really supported me and believed in me. Because when she said it, I wanted to look at her like, I will. Okay. I was like, I'm glad you think so.
No pressure.
I did. But yeah, it was very, it could be, I would say, compromised by preconceived notions sometimes. That's not to say it was a poor system. It's just, again, that's part of the small town dynamic. That's not so much fun.
And it's so interesting how it only takes one person, either supporting you or kind of denying you to really make such a big difference in your life. Like, if it wasn't for your mom kind of marching down to the school, you might not have ever taken a certain path because you wouldn't have had the exposure to civics. And likewise, there's, I've talked to several people who had that one teacher who really got them interested in whatever. And that really informed where they were going to go with their life. So did you have that experience in reading or writing or English or anything like that?
Oh yeah. Yeah. my 11th grade English teacher, Mr. Jeff Bone, he was the first person to really, I won't say the first person, because I had a fourth grade teacher that really thought I had a talent for writing. I didn't think it at the time, so it wasn't something I pursued. She believed in me. I didn't think I could do it. But by the 11th grade, I kind of realized that I'm doing better at the writing assignments than people around me. It comes easier to me. And so it kind of made me consider, well, maybe this is something I could do. I didn't know anything about writing. I love to read, but I didn't know anything about writing. And so I had a teacher, Mr. Bone, who he started taking an interest in me and introducing me to writing in books that were outside the syllabus, so to speak. So he gave me like, the collected works of Samuel Beckett, and he gave me Strunk and White's Elements of Style, and he had me reading. I remember he gave me actually, it's a very controversial book. He gave me a book called Last Exit of Brooklyn by Selby, these were books that were a little bit above my pay grade, so to speak, but they showed me what really strong, fearless writing could accomplish. And so he was the first person that really fanned that flame in me and made me think, oh, wow, I can do this, as a profession, as something more than just a hobby.
Do you, are you still in touch with him, or have you been in touch with him?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I actually dedicated my first detective novel was with a small publisher out of Maryland called Intrigue Publishing. And Mr. Bone is he's on the dedication page.
Oh, that's
and
great.
Then, it's funny when you're a kid, teachers are like these rarefied Olympians. You don't think of them as human beings. But now that, and he wasn't that much older than us. He was like, I was 16. He was like 28. And so in the years since, I've gotten to to be friends with him outside of school. He and I have had dinner together, and he still supports me from afar. Him and his wife, he has a whole story. I wish he probably should write it himself. When him and his wife retired, they decided to become citizens of the world. So they travel all around the world, all about 300 days out of the year. Like right now, I think he was in Belarus when the COVID happened. So they're back in America now. He's a very interesting guy. He really is. And like I said, he's that teacher that just kept pushing me to really take writing seriously. And so I thank him every day.
So did you go off to college then? Did you want to study English at that point?
Yeah. Well, see, what happened was I went, that's a good way of starting the story in the South. What happened was I graduated, I went to college and I majored in English, and I went to a small liberal arts college. And again, because we didn't have a lot of money, I was trying to work and go to school and pay my own tuition. My mom and dad weren't able to help me with that. And then unfortunately, after 2 years, when I was born, my mom was partially disabled from neurological condition. And then when I was in college, for a period of time, it got a lot worse. And so I had to drop out of college to help. And by the time it got a little bit better, 2 years had passed and I didn't go back to school. I ended up doing my Jack Kerouac thing then. I decided to I had some friends that had moved out to New Mexico. And they were like, come out to New Mexico, come live with us. We're in a sort of commune. And I was like, oh, okay. So you mean you're sort of broke? And but I ended up going out there, hitchhike out there. Well, I hitchhiked and rode the bus. And I lived out there in New Mexico for about a year. But I came back and through all those various adventures and things that I did, I just kept trying to get better at writing. I took, whenever I took creative writing courses at community colleges. I read voraciously, and not just fiction. I read actual, books about writing, and just kept trying to get better at it. I just felt like, I think everybody's put on earth to do something. And I don't mean to sound too facetious and I hope I don't come off as arrogant, but I just felt like writing was my thing. I always felt like that. I could always tell a story, whether it was in conversation over a beer or actually sitting down and writing. And it took a long time though. It took a long time. I didn't really start getting published until in my 30s. And that was just short stories here and there.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, first of all, I feel like we could have a whole separate conversation about your 2 years of adventures, because I imagine there's a lot in there to unpack.
Oh yeah,
but yeah, you're totally right about
episode of Burning. I'm gonna say there's a whole Burning Man episode that I don't know if I can get into. So
well, that'll be for a part 2. But I'm sure sure that trip informed a lot of who you are, and you're right. It is so I find it fascinating. One of the reasons that this show even exists is because I'm so curious about what makes people who they are, and do they know who they are? And, you know, with you, you had that sense early on that, like, you know, maybe not even a story, or maybe not even a writer, but you're a storyteller, and I want to be able to tell stories. And I mean, I didn't start writing until my 30s, and it just kind of came out of the blue. I had zero experience or background or interest in it, and it just hit me one day. And from that day on, I've been writing. And then I've had that same sense of like, holy shit, maybe this is what I was supposed to be doing all along. Or maybe it took all those years of disparate experiences to get me to have this kind of epiphany. But it sounds like for you, you kind of knew. So then I'm sure in your 20s, you're like, okay, this is who I am. This is what I'm good at. How do I make money doing this? Which is the real struggle, right?
Yes. Oh man, I tell you what, I tell anybody that asks, and I get asked this question a lot now. It's like, you know, did you ever think of giving up? Oh yeah, every day. It's like, you know, I mean, you know, you get enough rejections, you like, well, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. But you know, it's those things. I think I have a sense. How can I put it? I had a sense of, and I'm gonna censor myself here, but I just had this effort. You know, I just had this effort sense where, like, I'm just gonna keep writing. I don't care how many times I get rejected, because I like it. I like the way it makes me feel. I like who I am when I'm writing. So maybe people never get it. Maybe I'll be John Kennedy O'Toole, and my mom will have to publish My Confederacy of Dunces, you know, in the future. I don't care. I'm just gonna keep writing. And what happened was, I found that I was in the wrong genre. And let me back up and explain that. When I first started writing, I wanted to be a horror writer. I really wanted to write horror stories. I wanted to be the next Stephen King, Clive Barker, Richard Matheson, what have you. But what I found out later, and I look back on my early horror writings, that I always strayed toward a more naturalistic crime-ish type of story. Like even when I was writing supernatural stuff, it still had that feel of a crime novel. It was always a lot of rough characters. I never wrote about like the Lovecraftian protagonist who's like an academic, you know, at Arkham or whatever. I always wrote about, you know, real people, rough people I knew.
Gritty.
And eventually what happened was, exactly. I wrote really gritty Americana type characters. And what ended up happening was the reason I got into crime writing. I loved crime writing growing up. I loved reading, you know, all types of mystery and crime stories. But I didn't think I had the wherewithal to write those stories, because I wasn't going to set them in the city. I was going to set them where I grew up at. And I didn't know if anybody would be interested in that. And so what happened was, and I swear to God, it's a true story. Back in like 2011 or 2010, a friend of mine who's a belly dancer went to New York City. And she did a performance. And after her performance, she went to this bar in the Village on Sullivan Street. There's a bar called Shade. And there was a guy there named Todd Robinson, who was the bartender, but he also published a quarterly crime magazine, or he used to publish a quarterly crime magazine called Thug Lit. And him and her got to talking. And she said, hey, I got this friend that's a really good writer. And he said, well, if he writes crime stories, tell him send me one. So she comes home and we're out to dinner and she's like, hey, I met this dude. You should send him a story. I said, well, I don't think anybody wants to read a crime story set in a small town or whatever. And she's like, well, try it. And so I tried it and I got published. And that was where everything started to click for me. It's like, okay, this is my thing. I don't, you know, maybe I'm not going to be the next Stephen King, but I can write these stories and people seem to connect with them. That's how the whole ball got rolling with that. So I really didn't find my niche until I was like 36 or 37. So,
and maybe you wouldn't have found that niche had you not been writing what you had been writing previously, right? Like everything kind of, is a progression. And I mean, I agree with you 100%. Like I've had a lot of rejections and, they're all helpful somehow, one way or another. And that doesn't mean you're going to become eventually a popular novelist, but it does give you that feeling of like, if you get to that place that you had, that of like, fuck it, I'm going to keep writing because it makes me feel good. That's the place that you need to be at in order to be a good writer, I think. And I think everything else,
I agree.
Everything else follows, right? Like if you don't focus, because you can't control most of anything. You can control your writing, but most of everything else is out of your control. So if you just are having fun doing it and striving to get better doing it, then I truly believe that good things will follow. I mean, there'll be different good things for different people. Not everyone's going to, have sales like you have. But if you compare today versus 10 years ago, it's hard to even believe like where we are. We're like, I never would have thought I'd had books on a bookshelf that people buy.
It's funny. When I first started writing and I started getting a little bit of success, my short stories started getting published. My main goal was, oh man, I'd like to have a book one day get published by somebody and I'd like to get a few good reviews. That was it. That was the bar. That was the goal line. I wanted a book published by somebody. I wanted a book that was published by an actual company, and I wanted some people to like it. I didn't have any dreams beyond my mom having a copy of a book with my name on it. That was it. Or my cousins being able to order it off of Amazon. I didn't really have any dreams outside of that because I just didn't think anybody would get it. And I got to be honest, with Blacktop Wasteland and everything that's happened with it, there's no architecture behind that. It has exceeded my wildest dreams, and I didn't even dream that wild. I mean, and it's just sometimes it's just, I think luck is preparation meets inspiration. And, I just had a lot of luck with it. Don't get me wrong. I'm not, I think the book I think is a fun read. I'm glad people are connecting with it, but it just seemed to come about at a time when people were looking for something different. Yeah. And I just was very lucky to be in that spot, and that being said, even today, I'm still mildly shocked when people like it. It's like when I get people sending me really nice emails and stuff and people that connect with the book. And, it's like, I'm still slightly embarrassed when I get some really effusive praise for it. Yeah. I think that's just Southern Baptist in me. We're not good at taking compliments.
Well, I think it's also the writer in you, because I think, talking about goals, like one of my goals was to be able to call myself a writer at a cocktail party and not feel like a fraud. Because I think most writers kind of feel like, well, I write stories, but it doesn't pay great or whatever, so I can't really call myself a writer. But with Blacktop, it's interesting too because it is a great book, what about the timing? Like, who knows? Like, if it had been published a year earlier, a year later, would it have hit the same way? As much as the publishers, try to tell you, well, this and that, no one really kind of knows, because there's good books all the time that don't do great. And then there's some subpar books that take off, and then some that are just duly get their justice. So who knows what that formula is, but I guess all you could do is, be grateful and thankful that you really had connected with readers.
Well, it's funny you say that because and I was very lucky to get with a really good company with Flatiron. I was lucky to have an agent. I have a really great agent, Josh Gessler, who really believed in my work. But it's like there are different levels for different books. And initially, Flatiron, they did a good job getting the book out there, but it wasn't at the top of their catalog, if we're being honest. You know what I'm saying? And so it didn't get the same promotion that other books on the label got. And I understood that because I was a relatively new author. I had one independently published novel before this. So, they're taking a risk. And I think that's a part of the business that you gotta swallow sometimes. I just was, very lucky that people really connected with it. And once people connected with it, then it's like, oh, okay, we have something here. And they're willing to put a little more behind it, a little more. And now it's like, they're 100% behind it. And I couldn't be happier. But like you said, there are books that I've read, I think are masterpieces that for whatever reason just don't get that kind of love. And it's scary, man. It's still, I remember listening to an interview with the late Elmore Leonard, and they were telling him, the person was asking him something about, how do you feel being a best-selling author? And, how do you feel, do you think that diminishes your craft? And he says, every time I publish a new book, I'm not a best-selling author anymore. I'm a new author. And I think that was such a really interesting way of looking at it. And so, it's a terrifying part of the business, but all you can do is write the best book you can and hope people click with it.
That's right. And there's no guarantees one way or another. Like everything's so cyclical, and there's no guarantees if you have a breakout that that train is going to keep running. Who knows? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And you could also have 20 books and none of them were ever a breakout, and you're just kind of chugging along. And it is infuriating, but it's also like kind of, there's something very beautiful about it too, because I love the idea of being a writer that, unlike so many other professions, it doesn't matter your age, that literally the best could be yet to come. You could be 75 and your what you're going to be known for forever comes out next year. I love that. And when I sit down to every new book, I'm so excited not about the idea of how's this going to sell. I'm excited about, I can't wait to figure out what this story's about. I just think that's just one of the best parts of being a writer.
Yeah, I think also for me, the thing that I love about writing is it's somewhat, I wouldn't say it's a meritocracy, but I think writing outside of all the creative arts, acting, singing, dancing, it's the one where everybody has the best shot. You can be like you said, you can be a 75-year-old first-time author. You can be a 35-year-old author that's got 6 or 7 books under their belt. You can be a 21-year-old wonderkin. Everybody has that same shot because, like you said, nobody knows what's going to click, what's going to break out. And so for me, writing is that thing where I just feel like it's, of the creative art, it's the most equitable, or it's as equitable as you can expect, because, you can be a writer with, a huge pedigree, an MFA, an English professor, and have a book that breaks out and does great. Like, you can be like a Philip Roth or someone like that, or you can be a William Gay, somebody who, never went beyond the 8th grade, was a house painter, but wrote books like Provinces of Night, which is one of the most beautiful Southern Gothic books you ever read. Or you'd be like Frank Bill, who's a down-to-earth guy who kind of just wrote, and created a book like, Donnybrook. Or, it's just so much, there's such a opportunity for advancement as a writer, regardless of your background. And I think that's what makes it so enjoyable for me.
Yeah, you're right. And I think, but it is what's different after you start getting published, though, is you start to you can't just be a writer in a way. You have to be part of a team, right? Like, you're working with a publisher, you're working with an agent and a publicist and all that. And you have to understand how they produce and market and distribute your books, and you have to be part of that team instead of just being precious. Here's my book, take it or leave it.
It's so funny because I think what hurts a lot of writers, I think writing is so personal. Again, of the creative arts, it's, to me, the most personal. There's a lot of yourself in your work. That doesn't mean that you're the character or the protagonist or whatnot. It just means you put so much of your heart and soul. Writing is like telling yourself a joke for a year and then hoping at the end somebody else gets the punchline. And it's so much work in it that I think people who are really, really connected to their writing sometimes forget the business aspect of it. That, like you said, being part of a team and marketing and all of that becomes a part of that business. Because once you get published and you have a book that does well or moderately well, you're an industry. Even, you may not be Lee Child, you may not be Stephen King, but you're an investment now, and you have to realize that. And I think you have to look at that. I think, I have friends who are still writers who are trying to get their first big break, or writers who are on the come up. And some of them have a really pedantic look at art. They're like, well, I won't sacrifice my art and I won't do this. How dare they do it? And I'm like, you got to bend that break when it comes to this. And I think that's what makes the difference for some folks. It's like, there are hills that I'm willing to stand on when it comes to stuff that I'm working on now. And then there are other things like, you know what? I'm not going to fight. I don't have 4 hours to argue about this. And so I think that's a part of the game, unfortunately, that you have to become adept at. And you got to get good at the social media, and you got to get good at the interviews and the promotion. And you got to do all that while still trying to tell a compelling story within your own process. I have a weird process when I write, and I like to write late at night. I like to write, listen to music. I have an easy chair and a lap desk. So you've got to do all this business at the same time, still trying to tell a interesting story. So it can be challenging, but I wouldn't want it any other way. So
yeah, and also the realization that the publisher and all these other people who might be giving you comments that might be difficult, everyone's trying to move in the same direction, right? They're all trying to sell your book. So it's not like they're trying to screw you over. And so, I've always approached it, because I had zero experience in writing or the publishing industry. I've always approached it like, oh my God, I've got these industry experts who are giving me great advice. And it's going to cause a lot of edits or whatever, but they know what they're doing, at least more so than I know. They know what sells. They know. So I've never had really any major issues where I felt like, I should be precious about my work, and if I do, it's always over very small things, and never like major. Like every time I see my editorial notes, hey, these are all great pieces of advice that's going to make my book better.
I got to tell you, I'm blessed to have a really good editor at Flatiron. And she's made me a better writer. Her name's Christine Kopacik. And just to give you an idea, I tend to write, my stuff skewers very dark.
Yeah.
So if it's up to me, I kill everybody. And so she's pulled me back a little bit in certain ways. And there was a scene in Blacktop Wasteland. It's not in the final book, but there was a scene in Blacktop Wasteland where there was this huge, like, I don't know if you're familiar with the movie, but the movie Heat. It was like Heat type shootout.
Oh, yeah.
In the middle of a country road. And it was like, sawed off shotguns versus AR-15s and, people with, big 45 caliber guns. And, there were people rolling under cars and just a lot of action. And I thought it was a really well-written scene. I liked it. And I remember her telling me when she read it, I like this scene. It's very well written. But I think this is what you would want to do. This isn't what Bug would want to do. And that was a light bulb moment for me. And I was like, wow, you're right. Because she's like, Bug is smarter than this. He wouldn't engage in a running gun battle in the middle of the street at 4:00 in the morning, on a backcountry road. And it made me sit back and think, it's like, wow. And I think that's the great thing about a good editor. Like you said, they want the best for you. They want you to succeed. And sometimes they got to push you and prod you to go one way. And sometimes they got to save you from yourself. And I think that's, whenever I talk to people who are trying to get on or trying to be writers, that's the thing I try to impart to them a lot. Is like, yes, it's your book. Yes, it's your story. But if you get with a publisher, you get with a professional team, they want the best book, because at the end of the day, they're trying to move units. And I think that's the thing. That doesn't mean that you're a sellout. That doesn't mean that you're taking away from your artistic dignity. It means that more people are going to have eyes on the product, but it is a product. And I think that's hard for some people to separate sometimes.
Well, I think,
at least in my experience, I've met some people.
Yeah,
like
totally. And I think every writer has to ask themselves at some point, like, what do I want out of this? Like, do I want people to read my book? And if so, do I want them to read it as many as possible? And if the answer to that is no, then you have complete control. If the answer is yes, then you have to understand, like, how do the books actually get to readers? And it's not usually, effective by self-publishing. I mean, sometimes it is, but generally speaking, you're working with a team who knows what they're doing. So, and that scene sounds great. And I would have read the shit out of that scene, and hopefully you can like have it as like, I've cut scenes. I've cut I wrote a 4,000 word scene that made no sense, but it was super gritty and dark and disturbing. And we cut it out, and I'm like, okay, I'll throw it up on my website for a month as a bonus gift to readers or whatever. So, as long as
there's a character. I got to tell you, there's a character that I have tried to put in 4 goddamn books. And every time I put him in the book, the editors are like, oh, I like him, but this just doesn't work. So now I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do the same thing. I said, I'm just going to write a short story with him in it.
Yeah.
And it's and he's this very cool character. And I was like, what I do is when I have to take stuff out, I copy and paste it into a file, and I have a save it for later file. And I was like, maybe I'll work that into a story later on. And I think the book I'm working on now, I think he actually is going to be able to make an appearance in this book. So we'll cross the fingers. Poor guy. I've put him in so much stuff, and it's such an eccentric character that it just doesn't seem to work in anything I've done before. But what I'm working on now is very Southern Gothic-y / almost horror. So maybe he'll fit in this one. So
that's funny. Well, listen, man, we're going to do a quick storytelling and wrap things up. So are you up for that? A quick little impromptu storytelling. All right, I'm gonna just grab some random book off of my wall. So I'm not even going to think about it. I'll be right back. I had to grab a Stephen King because you had mentioned Stephen King. So
I'm good with that.
Yeah. So I assume you're a big fan.
Oh, one of the biggest.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
So this is Nightmares and Dreamscapes, his short stories. So pick a page between 1 and 700.
Let's do page 230. Nice round number.
All right, and pick a number between like 1 and 5, and that'll be the sentence I pick.
Let's do 5.
All right. So I'm going to read this sentence, and then you give me a sentence or two, whatever you feel comfortable with, and I'll do a sentence or two, and we'll just do it for a couple minutes, and I'll call an end to it at some point.
Okay.
And we'll see where it goes. So it's a woman talking to somebody else. Hang this up for me, will you? She asked. I've got to pee.
He looked at her, wondering why did she wait until now to pee? They've been in the house for the last 15 minutes, but now she's got to pee.
It was so typical and so typically frustrating. He knew that they were running late, but this was one thing they could not afford to be late for. How many times had he told her, if they weren't there on time today, that could be the end of everything?
He took the picture from her, stared in her eyes, and said in his nicest, calmest, most conciliatory voice, "Of course, dear, but we've got to get out of here. We're pressed for time." She nodded her head in that way that always made it. She nodded her head in that way that seemed to always irritate him. That sort of dismissive yet pretentious way that seemed cute when they first started dating, but now grated on his nerves like nails on a chalkboard.
She went into the bathroom, and he sat on the couch. His first glance was over to his left, to the liquor cabinet, thinking how good 2 fingers of whiskey would taste while he waited for her. His second glance was to the right, out the front window, to his Dodge Dart. And he started thinking, I could just leave. I could just leave. Should I leave?
The thought had come into his mind before on numerous occasions. Times when she would embarrass him at a party. Times when she would embarrass him and belittle him when they were home alone. Times when he was on his way home from work, and instead of taking the right down Crab Thicket Road, he could take the left onto the interstate. Sometimes he wondered, did he make the right decision between her and Beth? Beth. He tried to find her a couple times on Facebook, but she never come up under her old name. Maybe she was married now. Maybe she was happy. Or maybe she had the same questions he had.
Fuck it, he thought. I'm going to go find Beth. This is all I have to do. Who hasn't dreamed of just running? He stood, grabbed his car keys, grabbed his wallet, and in a last-minute decision, grabbed the whiskey bottle and headed to his car. The bathroom door was still shut. She hadn't even flushed. He made his way out to the car, turned on the ignition, looked up at the sky, and wondered, if he were Beth, which direction would she be living?
He backed out of the driveway, put the car in drive, looked out the back window one last time at the little single-story rancher, the rose bushes in front of the house, the ones that he took care of. He looked at the little door stopper, the little door knocker that his mom had gotten them for their 5th anniversary. All those things. Supposedly, this was the perfect life, everyone told him. But the perfect life could be horribly boring, and it could be dreadfully mundane. He hit the gas, cruised down the driveway, turned right, got on the street, turned on the radio, and of all the songs, for all those radio stations, the one that came on was a song he knew by heart, a song by his favorite band, the band that she hated. It was Kiss. It was Peter Criss singing about Beth. He thought to himself, well, that's got to be a good goddamn omen.
I think we're going to call it there. That was perfect. That was great, man. I think you and I should.
That was cool.
Yeah, we should collaborate on a project. I think we were kind of in sync there.
That's a cool little. I've never done anything like that. That's a cool little exercise. I like that, man. Man. I do that with everybody, and I don't just have thriller or mystery writers on. I have nonfiction writers, I have science writers, and we always have to make up a story at the end. And some people kind of freak out a little bit at the idea of it, and others just like, man, we just fucking roll. And a lot of times it gets pretty dark. So I appreciate that. No, man, that's cool. I mean, I like that whole process. It's funny though, but it's funny. That's a microcosm of the way sometimes I write. It's piling one decision on top of another and seeing whether, it's like a house of cards a little bit, and seeing whether the cards fall or whether they can stand together. And that's sort of, like I said, again, it's sort of a microcosm of how I put stuff together. Now, that was fun. I enjoyed that. I might have to steal that from you. That's pretty cool.
You should. Yeah. I always have a good time. It's a little scary for me every time because I got to do it every goddamn time, but it's always a good time. Well, listen, buddy, I was really glad we were able to finally connect, and you've just been a thrill to talk to. And I'm so excited and so happy for you and all the great success that you've had. And, I know more good things are coming your way. And, I just wish you all the best.
Oh, man. Well, thank you so much for having me, man. I've been a huge fan of yours for a long time. I know we ran into each other. I think it was in Thriller Fest.
Yeah.
We got to talk for a few minutes, but no, I've been a huge fan of yours for a long time, man. I can't wait to see what you come up with next. And I really appreciate you having me, man. This was a blast. Thank you so much.
Thanks, buddy. We'll talk again soon. Take care.
All right, man. Take care, brother. Bye-bye.
That was my conversation with SA Cosby. We had a fantastic time. Great guy. I really enjoyed chatting with him, and I'm looking forward to hopefully someday seeing him in the flesh at a conference. Hopefully next year. I think it's going to happen. If you want to find out more about him, I'm not actually sure about a specific website, but if you Google SA Cosby, there's just tons of shit online. So you can find out plenty of stuff about him. And if you want to find out more about me or subscribe to my newsletter, please do. Please go visit me at carterwilson.com. That's it for now. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. More episodes coming up soon. Take care.